president, ahead of his meeting with the prime minister this morning, called a deal, a quote-unquote deal between Canada and the U.S. achievable.
Because the U.S. and the U.K., as we've just mentioned, has signed a tariff deal which will see lower charges for certain products for both countries.
Americans have to understand how hurt and frankly how furious Canadians are.
While Washington hesitated, Canada made its move and made it big. In 2025, Ottawa quietly greenlit a massive $3 billion investment package to expand critical mineral projects and LNG exports out of British Columbia. The centerpiece, a plan to boost Canadian LNG capacity to 14 million tons per year, enough to supply entire regions of Europe and Asia looking to replace Russian gas. Meanwhile, the United States, once the loudest voice in Arctic and energy politics, barely showed up. It pledged just $120 million to a single rare earths project in Greenland. Respectable maybe, competitive, not even close. While Trump-era rhetoric talked about buying Greenland, it's Canada that's actually closing deals with capital credibility and cooperation. This isn't about headlines anymore. It's about who shows up with real money and earns real trust. And right now, that's not America. That's Canada. Canada didn't just spend more. It rewired the game. Fresh off a $3 billion wave of LNG and critical minerals investments, Ottawa revealed the true shape of its long-term strategy, the creation of a $3.1 billion Greenland Green Transition Fund. This wasn't some isolated infrastructure project. It was a coordinated economic pivot backed by the European Union, Norway, and Nordic sovereign wealth funds designed to reshape not just Greenland's economy, but the future architecture of Western supply chains. In an era defined by the collapse of old trade norms and the scramble for resource security, Canada positioned itself not as a competitor, but as a builder. While Washington delivered slogans and threats, Ottawa delivered systems. The details tell the story. Unlike traditional extractive agreements, Canada's model offers 30-year development licenses with strict provisions for local labor hiring, environmental oversight, and a profit-sharing framework. A portion of mining revenues will flow directly into Greenland's Sovereign Future Fund, a long-term national savings plan that ensures the island's wealth stays on the island. In short, it's not just about access, it's about shared prosperity. It's about trust, and that trust is paying off.
I think what they really want is to be treated as an equal partner, to be valued for their important both geopolitical situation, their strategic position on the globe, the minerals that they have.
In Nuuk and Copenhagen, Canadian diplomats are no longer treated as outsiders or opportunists. They're welcomed as reliable partners. Greenland is responding with open bidding rounds, expanded diplomatic channels, and a willingness to deepen cooperation. Meanwhile, Ottawa's coalition is growing stronger. EU member states and Nordic development banks are matching Canada's investment commitments not because they're forced to, but because the Canadian model has become the new gold standard for Arctic development. Contrast that with the United States, whose Arctic presence is rapidly fading. Its only active project in the region is a $120 million investment in the Tanbreez rare earths site. A respectable endeavor on paper, but one that looks isolated and ad hoc compared to Canada's sweeping vision. There is no US-led coalition, no future-proof infrastructure plan, no green pivot. Washington may still believe it's leading, but on the ground, it's clear America is watching from the sidelines. This shift reflects more than just money. It marks the arrival of a new framework for influence, one built on alignment, not aggression. While Washington clings to transactional politics, Canada is cultivating long-term economic ecosystems that can survive political changes, market shocks, and even wars. And in a world grappling with climate disruption and Chinese supply chain dominance, that model predictable, inclusive, values-driven is exactly what global partners are looking for. In 2025, the most powerful countries are not those who extract the most, but those who integrate best. This is no longer about who controls a mine or signs the biggest check. It's about who shapes the future of a decarbonized economy. And Canada, through quiet diplomacy and deep multilateralism, is emerging not just as a participant, but as the architect. So while America may still carry the biggest voice, Canada is speaking the language the world wants to hear: stability, cooperation, and shared gain. And in the new Arctic order, that language may just become the new currency of power.
Trump says he wants to buy us like we were a common prostitute. I'm sorry to say that, but I got so angry. I think it's so disrespectful to the Inuit people of Greenland. to be treating us this way, to walk in like we are uneducated, unknowing people who are primitive and would fall for whatever flash they were supposed to come with.
So why is the world turning to Canada? Because in a global economy rattled by trade wars, sanctions, and climate chaos, Canada offers the one thing the market values more than speed scale or even price predictability. Let's break it down, starting with energy. While American LNG exports have soared in volume, their reliability has collapsed. Domestic price surges, environmental litigation, and partisan gridlock in Congress have made U.S. energy policy a roller coaster. Just this year, LNG terminals from Texas to Louisiana were put on regulatory hold or hit with political restrictions, delaying exports at a time when Europe and Asia were scrambling for fuel. Meanwhile, Canada has stayed boring, and that's exactly why global buyers love it. Thanks to a string of long-term contracts, some stretching 15 to 20 years, Canadian LNG is flowing steadily through ports like Vancouver, which just hit record shipping volumes. These aren't just exports, they're signals. Indicators that Canada is quietly becoming the most bankable LNG supplier in the Western Hemisphere. But predictability isn't the only reason. There's also price. Right now, Canadian LNG is trading at nearly $0.71 per MMBTU, cheaper than the US benchmark. That may sound small, it isn't. For countries like Japan, Germany, or India importing millions of tons per year, that difference adds up to hundreds of millions in savings. And the best part for buyers, these savings don't come with the drama of US politics. No threatened embargoes, no last-minute export bans, just gas delivered. But let's zoom out even more. Because what's really driving this shift isn't fuel, it's reputation. Canada has quietly built a brand that blends green credentials, regulatory stability, and multilateral diplomacy. Investors know that Ottawa doesn't wake up and change policy overnight. Its climate targets are real, its contracts are enforceable, and its foreign policy doesn't shift every election cycle. That matters especially to nations looking to decouple from unstable or authoritarian regimes. If you're trying to reduce dependence on Russia or hedge against China, why replace one unpredictable supplier with another? This is where Canada thrives, not by being the loudest, but by being the most consistent. And it shows in minerals too. Rare earth buyers from France to South Korea are now funneling deals through Canadian-backed Greenland projects, not US-led ventures. Why? Because they know Canada will keep its word, honor environmental protocols, and avoid the kind of retaliatory tax wars that have defined Washington's recent trade behavior. In short, Canada doesn't just export gas or minerals, it exports trust. It has positioned itself as the logistical Switzerland of the Western supply chain, not neutral, but dependable, not isolated, but never chaotic. In a post-pandemic, post-Ukraine world, that's gold. Because today, global trade isn't just about volume, it's about values. Buyers want to know they're not funding environmental disasters. Governments want to know they're not risking diplomatic fallout. And companies want to know they can plan 10 years ahead, not 10 days. Canada delivers on all three. And that's why as Washington's partners grow nervous and Brussels seeks new anchors, Ottawa is quietly becoming the go-to power for clean, strategic, and ethical supply. Not because it dominates, but because it delivers. Not long ago, U.S. exports to Canada formed the backbone of North America's industrial engine. Refined fuels, drilling equipment, heavy machinery all flowed north, powering factories, pipelines, and bilateral growth. But now, those numbers are shrinking and fast. In just the last quarter, exports of refined fuels, industrial hardware to Canada have quietly slipped by 6 to 8%. Not because demand disappeared, but because trust did. Ottawa is no longer waiting for Washington to stabilize. It's moving on and moving fast. Just last month, natural gas exports from the U.S. to Canada slumped sharply, not because of technical issues, but because Canada no longer needed them. New LNG terminals in British Columbia are now feeding domestic demand and redirecting excess supply toward Europe and Asia, bypassing U.S. networks entirely. Canada is effectively closing the loop, insulating its energy supply from American unpredictability. One pipeline, one port, one new contract at a time. And this realignment isn't just commercial, it's political, it's strategic. When the US slapped tariffs on Canadian goods in 2024, it wasn't just a policy move, it was a rupture. Over 33,000 Canadian manufacturing jobs disappeared overnight, sparking outrage, triggering lawsuits, and galvanizing a new wave of Canada First industrial planning. The goal: never again be at the mercy of US trade mood swings. And here's the twist: the tariffs backfired. Instead of pressuring Ottawa, they weakened US access to its closest ally. Canadian firms began restructuring their supply chains, cutting American contracts and favoring partners in the EU and Japan. Some even rewrote procurement rules to exclude US components entirely, citing volatility risk. It's a quiet decoupling. No press conferences, no shouting matches, just doors closing. The result: US exporters are watching their strongest trade corridor narrow, not from retaliation but from irrelevance. This is what happens when trust collapses in a supply chain. It doesn't explode, it evaporates. And once it's gone, no amount of America First rhetoric can bring it back. So the real question isn't, what does America still sell to Canada? It's, how long before Canada doesn't need anything from America at all? Because if the US can't be trusted as a stable supplier, someone else will fill that space. And judging by recent deals, they already are. Trust isn't built with threats, it's built with infrastructure. While the US issued tariffs and tough talk, Canada laid down pipelines, signed 30-year agreements, and quietly became the world's most dependable energy partner. No political spectacle, no erratic subsidies, just contracts and the will to deliver on them. In 2025, global buyers are no longer chasing the cheapest LNG. They're chasing the most stable supplier. And right now, that's not America, it's Canada. So, what does the US have to offer a volatile Congress? A patchwork of trade threats and policy reversals. The world is watching, and it's choosing predictability over price. Because in today's economy, stability is the new currency, and pipelines speak louder than politics. The real question is no longer, who has the gas? It's, who can be trusted to deliver it year after year? And if Washington can't answer that, how long before even its closest allies stop asking?